Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Dark Crossroads. This is your host, Roxanne Fletcher, and today we're doing something a little different. I thought I would just sprinkle it into our mix here. We are covering the story of the Circleville letters. If you're into true crime, I am sure you've heard of this story, but let's just jump right in and get down to the nitty-gritty details. Over the course of nearly 20 years, the local residents, businesses, schools, and government officials of Circleville, Ohio, would receive over 1,000 anonymous letters containing serious allegations ranging from infidelity to child sexual abuse and corruption. While the torment eventually escalated to attempted murder, one man would be arrested in connection with the poison pen letters. However, the identity of the author, or more likely, authors, has never been conclusively proven. Before the city of Circleville, Ohio became known for the dark decades-long mystery of the poison pen letters, it was primarily known for its pumpkin show, Ohio's oldest and largest festival, which dates back to 1903. Following the American Revolutionary War, many settlers relocated west. Circleville, so named for the circular layout of the original settlement, constructed within a Hopewell tradition earthwork, was founded by one such group of European Americans in 1810. For much of its history, it was a city with the quiet air of a small town, a place where people felt safe and content. But all of that was soon to change. The anonymous letters would begin in 1976. The original recipient was a local bus driver named Mary Gillespie, who worked for the Westfall School District. Written in distinctive block letters, the note accused her of having an affair with school superintendent Gordon Massey, a married father of one. The envelope was postmarked Columbus, located 25 miles south of Circleville, and had no return address, signed simply the Circleville writer. The letter stated, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house, and I know you have children. This is not a joke. Please take it serious." Mary, who had a husband and 2 children herself, was shaken by the letter. Who was this individual, and why were they harassing her? The letters continued to come to the Gillespie home, but Mary chose to ignore them. Though she would later deny the allegations of infidelity, Mary initially kept the notes a secret from her husband. That is, until he began to receive his own letters. The anonymous writer told Ron Gillespie that his wife was cheating on him with Massey and that he needed to take care of it. However, when Mr. Gillespie did not take any action, the threats started to escalate. "Gillespie, you have had 2 weeks and have done nothing. You are a pig. Make her admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CB, posters, signs, billboards until the truth comes out. Only pigs ride motorcycles. Good hunting in your red and white truck on your way to work. I followed him for weeks since last summer, and I have seen her meet with him several times." The writer soon started to send similar letters to the school's vice principal about the alleged affair. "I shall send you proof about driver number 62917. She has a child in school there now. I shall prove this shortly. I expect him to be discharged. You'll see that I am telling the truth." No proof was forthcoming. However, it's notable that the author knew Mary's driver number for her bus, which suggested that it was someone connected to the school. The question is, who? By this point, Gordon Massey was also receiving poison pen letters. In them, the writer threatened to slash his tires, cut his brakes if he did not end this alleged affair. One letter that was sent to Mrs. Gillespie reads, "Stay away from Massey. Don't lie when questioned about meeting him. I know where you live. I've been observing your house, and I know you have children. This is not a joke. Please take it serious. Everyone concerned has been notified, and everything will be over soon." With all of this piling up, events took an even more disturbing turn when the mysterious author began including Mary and Ron's 12-year-old daughter, Tracy, in these letters, alleging that Massey was sexually abusing her. The letters also contained death threats. "It's your daughter's turn to pay for what you've done. I shall come out there and put a bullet in that little girl's head." Desperate for help, the Gillespies turned over the letters to the sheriff's office. Local law enforcement wiretapped phones, watched houses, and worked with the Postal Service to intercept letters, all to no avail. They were still no closer to finding out the identity of the Circleville writer. What had begun as a campaign of intimidation targeted specifically at the Gillespies and Gordon Massey soon broadened out to include many other Circleville residents who were now regularly getting their poison pen mail, also postmarked from Columbus. Who was the individual who appeared to know the town's darkest, most intimate secrets? Frustrated, stressed out, and obviously not satisfied with law enforcement's failed efforts at discovering the identity of this mysterious writer, the Gillespies turned to Ron Gillespie's sister and brother-in-law, Karen and Paul. They showed the two the letters they had received and enlisted their help in figuring out who was behind them. Paul and Karen, for their part, felt the answer was obvious: David Longberry. Now, something about David Longberry is he was a fellow bus driver of Mary's and had made passes at her multiple times. She rebuffed him each time, and her sister-in-law and brother-in-law considered it plausible that he was bitter about it and wanted revenge. He was also in a position to know Mary's driver's number, which was listed in one of the letters. Paul and Karen decided to write him a letter, telling him that they knew he was responsible for the hate mail and asking him to stop. Interestingly, the anonymous letters did cease for a time following this confrontation with Longberry. Mary and Ron breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that their ordeal was finally at an end. But really, it was just the beginning. Now, while the letters did stop briefly, they were replaced with obligatory signs that appeared along Mary's daily bus route. The signs contained much of the same content and allegations as the unsettling notes that were sent to them, but now they were publicly posted for the entire town to see. The Gillespies were worried about their daughter, who was often referred to in the hateful messages. Determined to minimize Tracy's embarrassment and discomfort, Ron worked diligently to take the signs down as soon as he came across them. Paul, Ron's brother-in-law, described the toll of the stress that Ron had taken on in the following statement. Ron was devastated and he was distraught. He didn't get much sleep during this period of time in his life. He was frantic and would drive around an hour or two in the morning before his shift began, looking for any of these posted signs. Ron worked very hard to figure out what it was really all about and to have the problem solved. In August of 1977, Mary headed to Florida with her sister. It was meant to be a getaway from the worries that had plagued her for the last year. It was rumored around Circleville that Mary was actually going to Florida to meet with Gordon Massey, but this has never been confirmed, and I think that this rumor went around just from the signs that were posted and the letters being discovered by the town. Obviously, it's just rumor upon rumor. With Mary gone, Ron was left to deal with the terror campaign on his own. On the evening of August 19th, the Gillespie home received a phone call. Tracy heard her father shouting at the unidentified caller in the next room. He was convinced that he was speaking to the Circleville letter writer. Intending to confront this person, Rob grabs his .22 caliber revolver and hastily leaves in his 1971 Ford pickup truck. Just 50 minutes later, a shocking discovery is made. This is the wreckage of Ron's truck, which had apparently crashed into a tree at the end of the road. Sadly, Ron, who wasn't wearing his seatbelt, was found dead inside of the vehicle. Curiously, it was determined that a shot had been fired from Ron's revolver, but neither a bullet hole nor the bullet itself was found, only the casing. The toxicology report revealed that Ron had a blood alcohol level of 0.16, twice the legal limit. However, his family argued that this was impossible, as Ron was never a heavy drinker. They also felt certain that foul play was to blame for his untimely death. Had he been run off the road? Had he been attacked? Or was this just an accident? Paul was vocal about his belief that his brother-in-law had in fact been murdered. He stated that the sheriff agreed with me that there was foul play, and then when I contacted him again, he changed his attitude completely. Though Ron Gillespie died under strange circumstances, what or whom had he fired his gun at before crashing? There was nothing to indicate that foul play was involved. Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe concluded that this was simply a tragic accident. Following Ron Gillespie's death, the signs and letters continued. Some of them made shocking accusations, alleging corruption by the sheriff and claiming that the town's physician and coroner, Ray Carroll, had sexually abused minors. 10 years later, the later claim would be proven true when Carroll was exposed as a serial sexual abuser. Mary Gillespie eventually did confess to having an affair with Gordon Massey, but according to her, it didn't start until after her husband's death. While her timeline was questionable, she hoped that transparency and honesty might help put an end to the harassment. Unfortunately, she was wrong. On February 7th of 1983, Mary came across a particularly disturbing sign along her bus route, one which graphically detailed the alleged affair between Massey and Mary's daughter, Tracy. She stopped the bus and was determined to take the sign down, but when she started to do so, she noticed something strange. She noticed a string connecting the sign to a box nearby. As it turns out, this small wooden box contained a handgun held in place by a styrofoam block. The string was connected to the trigger. This was presumably meant to be a lethal trap for anyone who might try to remove the sign. Although there was clearly an attempt made to file off the weapon's serial number, firearm examiners at BCI, which is Ohio's Bureau of Criminal Investigations, were able to recover the serial number. The serial number led law enforcement to a man named Wesley, who worked at the local Columbus Bush Brewery Company. However, according to Wesley, he sold the gun to his supervisor and hadn't been in possession of it for quite some time. So who was his supervisor? None other than Paul, Mary and Ron's brother-in-law. Yep, that's right, the gun that was placed as a booby trap to shoot whoever removed the sign, which is most likely going to be Mary or her daughter Tracy, belonged to her brother-in-law. Paul maintained his innocence from the outset, but was cooperative with investigators. He stated that the handgun was stolen from him weeks earlier and that he believed he was being framed. Police obviously were skeptical, especially after their new suspect failed a polygraph test. Now, personally, I would not base anything off of a polygraph test. There's good times for them and obviously bad times, but this is just part of the evidence. The officers brought a few of the Circleville letters to Ron and asked him to do his best to replicate the distinctive block lettering in his own handwriting. He complied with this request, and afterward, the sheriff determined that his writing was a perfect match for that of the Circleville letter writer and promptly arrested him. During his trial, Karen, Paul's ex-wife, with whom Paul had recently gone through a very nasty divorce with, alleged that she found dozens of the letters inside their home while they were still living together. But when asked to produce the documents, she stated that she'd thrown them all away. It's worth noting that by this point, Karen had lost everything in the divorce settlement, custody of their children, their home, their savings, and was living in a trailer on Mary Gillespie's property. The defense tried to keep the letters, which they argued weren't related to the booby-trapped gun, out of the trial, but the judge ultimately admitted 39 of them. Prosecution successfully pointed out similarities between these letters and the writings found on the box of the gun contraption. Prosecutors also procured the testimony of a handwriting expert who stated that based on these similarities, such as the block handwriting and the overall cadence and message, it was possible that these letters were written by Paul. A second expert, who was originally a defense witness, supported this conclusion also. One detail that the jury never heard was that another bus driver spotted a tall man with sandy brown hair near the sign roughly 20 minutes before Mary got there. He was supposedly driving a yellow El Camino. Conversely, Paul had dark hair and was much shorter than the man she saw. Additionally, he did not own an El Camino. No efforts were made to either locate the vehicle or learn the identity of this said man. However, Karen, who was reportedly dating a man who matched the description at the time, although he didn't have an El Camino either. Ultimately, Paul was found guilty of attempted murder and given the maximum sentence of 7 to 25 years in prison. Now, though many were initially satisfied that law enforcement had arrested the right person, it was not long before many anonymous letters started arriving at homes around Circleville and across central Ohio. Eventually, hundreds more came, all while Paul was behind bars. Once again, authorities and citizens were baffled. The prison warden even tried placing Paul in solitary confinement to see if that would put a stop to the madness, but it made no difference. Paul was then strip searched. All his incoming and outgoing mail was inspected. As far as the prison officials could tell, there was no way that he could be producing or sending any letters. Then, Paul himself began to receive letters. The Pickaway County Sheriff still believed that the imprisoned man was somehow responsible for the letters, but more people began to question whether Paul was actually guilty. Or, if he was guilty, did he have an accomplice? Or was this simply an opportunistic copycat? These and many other questions relating to this case remain unanswered. Former investigative journalists Martin Yant and Robin Yacoume, who also received letters from the Circleville author, have since said there is no chance that Paul wrote the letters from prison. They have also questioned the fairness of Paul's guilty verdict. It was stated, "Can I tell you I'm 100% sure that he didn't do it? No, I can't. But I can tell you, had I been sitting on that jury, I would have never sent a guy to prison based on that flimsy evidence." A particularly insidious development came when much of the hate mail began arriving laced with arsenic. Fortunately, nobody was seriously injured during these letters being sent. The case of the Circleville letters has spanned decades, inspiring many theories and many suspects. According to Karen, Paul came to resent Mary Gillespie for cheating on Ron and even blamed her for his demise, perhaps providing the motivation to begin a campaign of harassment against her. However, if Paul knew that the only thing standing between him and being discovered was a serial number, would he have done such a sloppy job of filing it off? And would he have used his own gun in the first place? Karen was the one who stood to gain the most from Paul's incarceration. With him in prison, everything that she'd lost in the divorce was hers once again. Later, it was also revealed that Paul believed that their son Mark was responsible for stealing the gun and never came forward with this information at the time because he didn't want to get his son in trouble. He reportedly came to believe that Mark, who never visited him in prison a single time, helped Karen frame him. Cryptically, in one correspondence, the letter writer bragged about framing Paul, saying, "When we set him up good." Some believe that David Longberry, bitter over his rejection by Mary and her interest in Massey, was the original Circleville writer, but once he stopped writing the poison pen notes, others saw an opportunity to exploit the situation for their own purposes. David Longberry eventually left Circleville to avoid prosecution after being caught sexually assaulting a young girl in 1999. He committed suicide shortly thereafter. Another option for who could be this anonymous writer could have been that it was somebody else entirely, either working on their own or working with one of the previous mentioned individuals. Or perhaps there were multiple other writers. These are certainly plausible theories, but we'll likely never know the full truth. The case was officially closed following Paul's arrest and has never been reopened. Paul was eventually released from prison in 1994. That same year, the popular television show, which I'm sure all of you have seen, Unsolved Mysteries, covered this case. Before production had even started, the studio received an anonymous letter warning them against filming the episode. This letter states, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, you El Sickos will pay. The Circleville writer." This makes it seem like the case was probably receiving more attention than the writer was obviously comfortable with. Regardless, following Paul's release and the airing of this Unsolved Mysteries episode, the Poison Pen letters, which had variously tormented and fascinated Circleville residents for decades, stopped as suddenly as they had started. Martin, who founded his own private investigation firm, has continued his mission to help the wrongfully convicted and still believes that Paul was innocent. He said, "I believe he was wrongly convicted, and I have a pretty strong suspicion that he may have been framed." He went on to talk about the complexity of the case. "I've been investigating this case off and on for 30 years, and every time I think I have figured it out, something else comes up, and then I have to go back and start all over again. It is just one heck of a mystery." In interviews, Yant has said that Paul, who wasn't from Pickaway County and didn't know anything about local politics, didn't fit the profile of the letter writer, who seemed to be passionately interested in Pickaway County politics. Sadly, Mark, Paul and Karen's son, battled with depression for years before committing suicide in 2002. Paul ended up dying of a heart attack in 2012. And in recent years, the letters have been examined by two experts, one of whom is certain that Paul was the author, while the other believes that he was not. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole has stated that she believes the author could be someone other than Paul. Another very popular show in the true crime community, 48 Hours, covered the Circleville letters in 2021, featuring a new independent analysis from forensic document expert Beverly East. East began by identifying Paul's distinctive writing patterns and then studied a selection of 49 letters from the case. East ultimately concluded that Paul was, in fact, the author. How certain was she? She stated, "I would go into court and swear on a Bible on the evidence that I have found." The case is still far from decided, of course. Nearly half a century after the discovery of the first letter, the Circleville mystery continues to inspire fiery debate and very heavy discussion. Alrighty guys, so I want to hear what you think. Who do you think is the author of the Circleville letters? After hearing all of this testimony and evidence, do you think it's David, the bus driver who had a crush on her, Karen, the sister-in-law, Paul, the brother-in-law, who ended up being incarcerated for everything, or is it somebody else entirely, possibly a group or several copycats? Let us know on social media. That'd be awesome. Alrighty guys, so thanks for hanging out again today. I hope that you liked this case and the covering of it. Most of our sources were the Crime Wire. It's a true crime website that is so interesting. They have a lot of good information, so check that out if you want to. Also, don't forget to send us any suggestions for cases that you want me to cover, or any of your stories that you want read on Creepy Corner. I'm taking them all. We want to hear them all. Send all of this to darkcrossroadspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us anywhere on social media. We're pretty much everywhere. And also, don't forget to rate, review, like, subscribe, follow wherever you're listening to this or wherever you find us. It really does help us out, and it's helping us get higher up in the charts and get more people to listen. With that said, don't forget to be weird, stay different, and don't trust anyone. Dark Crossroads Podcast is brought to you by Problem Wildlife.
Problem Wildlife serves Western Massachusetts and has been humanely protecting your house and family from unwanted pests for over 20 years. Take back your space with an animal control service that you can trust. They are family-owned, fully licensed, and are knowledgeable and dependable. To find out more about their services, simply visit their website at www.problemwildliferemoval.com. Again, that's www.problemwildliferemoval.com. And the website will also be included in our show notes.